All right, we are in Colin's Conversations. As always, the guests introduce themselves, so let everybody know who you are, your name, a little bit about what you do, and kind of what brought you here, and we'll get a little deep dive through all of it.
Yeah, so my name is Torres. I am a professional rugby player at this moment with Cleveland Rugby League. I also make music, and you're a friend of a friend, and invited me on the show to talk about my life, I guess.
Absolutely. Does that still sound weird to you, saying that you're a professional rugby player?
Yes, very weird. It's a very awkward thing to say. Yeah, I don't know. It's shocking. It's not something I ever thought would happen to me. And
right.
Now that it is, it's weird. It's very strange. I'm still coming to terms with it.
And you've been playing rugby your whole life, I presume, or is that something you picked up later in life?
I was 29 years old, just got out of the military. Well, I was about to get out of the military. I was like two months away from getting out of the military, and I was like searching for like what was next for me kind of deal. And I stumbled upon rugby, and it turned out to be like the best thing that ever happened in my life. So that was a little over 3.5 years ago now.
To be 3.5, 4 years into playing and already figured out how to play well enough to be professional, that's huge. Were you kind of like a football player or something before, or any other sports?
No, so I did a bit of boxing, jiu-jitsu, like MMA type stuff. I never played a contact sport. As a kid, I played baseball. Around a certain point, I realized baseball wasn't for me. My dad was super awesome at baseball. Put a lot of pressure on me that kind of turned me off to baseball. No dig at him at all, but you just kind of realize, at some point you're not.
For me, that was hockey. Like every boy in my dad's family played hockey, and like I did the little first year of Pee Wees, and towards the end, I kind of just look at him like, do I have to play this anymore? Like I get like everybody does in the family, but like this is not for me. Like I'm little now. At 5, 6, 7 years old, like I was like this big, and the thought of getting hit into the boards by the guys that are this big.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
No, I was like, I'm gonna go play basketball. Where if they hit me, I go to the line and I get 2 shots.
Exactly. Yeah, so I was never like a contact sport type person. Used to getting punched in the face, stuff like that, a lot of fights and that growing up, but I never really discovered my passion for a contact sport until I was 29, just about to turn 30, getting out of the military, and I was just looking for something. I didn't know what it was. I was just kind of really sad that I knew my career was at the end, and I didn't think I had anything else left in me. Other than being in the military, and I joined rugby, and it ended up being the best thing.
So what branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Air Force.
Air Force?
Yeah.
Were you flying stuff, or what were you doing there?
Oh God, no. So originally I was security forces. I ended up in a special part of the career field. So security forces is basically police. I never did any police work. I did air base defense. So what that entails is a lot of times we're attached to Army infantry, or in my regard, we were attached to Air Force OSI, which is like the FBI of the Air Force, basically. So we did a lot of source meets, stuff like that. Went out of our way to meet people that can inform us on bombs and things like that. Detainee ops, transporting prisoners, if you will, but they technically aren't prisoners. Just stuff like that. So it was a very different, it's not your typical cop role. Cops tend to guard gates and stuff like that. So we did a lot of kind of light infantry work. A lot of our guys went to like airborne school, ranger school, air assault, stuff like that. So it was a very different environment. And then shortly after that, I did 4 years of that, then was attached to the 165th ASOS, which was a tactical air control unit. TACP, it's a kind of like a special operations career, semi. They call in airstrikes for ground forces, a lot of infantry units and stuff like that. So I was attached to them for a year, and then I went to the school. I spent 8 months in the school, completed the school, but did not end up graduating. I was going through a divorce at the time and stuff like that. Kind of messed me up mentally, and some bad stuff happened.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then I ended up at the 910th Security Forces Squadron, which was my first actual police unit. So then that's where I ended my career.
Gotcha. Was all this America? Were you all over the globe, or what type of travel was involved with all that?
So with the 820th, I traveled around many different places, all over the U.S. pretty much for different qualifications, stuff like that. We did a lot of heavy weapons type stuff. So San Antonio, I've been to Oklahoma, different places like that. I was deployed to Iraq twice. Did a couple fun missions in a couple different places and stuff like that. So there was a lot of opportunity to go see the world pretty much. It was awesome. A great unit to be a part of, yeah.
Now, what would be something that you would consider like a major misconception of like the American stereotype of what Iraq is like?
I don't know. It's a weird thing. It's hard to being American and going, I think, pretty much anywhere. Mm-hmm. The comparison is very different. Mm-hmm. I think in European countries it's a little more relatable, but there still is, I think, a difference. It's very, palatable pretty much. Mm-hmm. Definitely in the Middle East, it's completely different. A lot of where they're at is still very survival mode. I think probably after the wars and stuff like that, it's a little more westernized, but it's a very different experience, and it's something I don't think it's not for the faint of heart. Mm-hmm. You really have to go in with an open mind and realize what's going on,
right?
And take the experiences for what they are. Everything's face value there. Mm-hmm. You don't know really who to trust, but at the same time, you can't write someone off just because.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you were in military the whole time that you start. That sounds like you started right out of high school, or was that early?
No,
20s?
So I graduated high school early. I graduated high school a year early. Tried college out for a little bit. Mm-hmm. It wasn't for me. I was always a very smart kid, but very lazy. I never had to work for anything in school, honestly, to be completely honest. School was never a challenge for me. And when I got to college, I just realized it was just a repeat of high school.
Right.
And I was like, I need a different challenge. I need to do something. My dad was in the military. He was Special Forces. And I was just like, I got to do something, And I thought about it, and I originally was joining the Army. My dad told me, he was like, hey, look, I was in Special Forces. When you get out, there's nothing to do afterwards. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't get a job just because, you did service. Right. It's like, go into something that you can, get a trade out of. And he was like, go Air Force, you're really smart. So I went Air Force, ended up not listening to a single thing he said. So one thing I do want to clarify, I was not in Special Forces. I did go to a school that was considered Battlefield Airmen, which can lead into special operations. So I do want to clarify that. I don't want any type of confusion with that. Yeah.
For somebody that doesn't know anything about rugby, kind of give me the 101 of what is rugby like as a sport, and how, we'll break it down from there, but what's the basics? How would you describe rugby?
For rugby, rugby is basically what American football is based off of. Mm-hmm. You have the term touchdown in rugby. To score what we call a try, you have to put the ball down on the ground in the try zone, right? Okay. So that's your touchdown. Passes can only be lateral or backwards. They can't be forward. You can kick the ball forward, and someone can run onto it. There's a bunch of rules.
We'll get into those. So essentially, it's almost like American football, but there's no pads, right?
Yes, no pads at all. Yeah. I won't say no pads at all. There's these special shirts you can buy that have it's not even half an inch of padding, but it's a quarter inch of padding or whatever on the shoulders,
right?
And that's your protection.
But no helmet, no big shoulder pads, no big leg guards.
Nope.
Just natural bodies, right?
Yep. Man against man.
Man against man, and then I believe it's. I did a basic research of rugby, so I wouldn't be fully retarded when I'm talking to you about this. But it's, I think, 15 people on. Is that 15 people on a team, or is that 15 people on the field for each team at a time?
So there's two versions of rugby, right? So there's rugby union, which has 15 people on each side.
Okay.
And then there's rugby league, which has 13 people on each side. So for Union, I play for the Cleveland Crusaders, and that is not a pro team.
Okay.
It's a men's club, amateur club, high level, very high level team. Great guys, awesome work ethic. And then there's who I play for currently right now, which is Cleveland Rugby League. And league is 13 men on the side.
Okay.
And there's certain rule variations to the game. So, like a brief rundown of the history is basically that rugby union overseas in like England and stuff like that was a very they call it like a schoolboy sport, where it's kind of prep boys played the sport. League is more of a the history behind it, the story behind it is that it was factory workers and miners.
Okay.
So it was more blue-collar people that started playing the sport. They necessarily weren't accepted by, the higher elite of the union guys.
Mm-hmm.
So it caused a split. So if you watch union, you watch league. League tends to be more of a very aggressive sport, and they say that's because of, the blue-collar roots. Not saying that union is not aggressive. It's a very aggressive sport, but it's a very different type of aggression. So there's more prim and proper to say in union, and then in league it's more like in your face. It's not unlikely to see people like fight each other on the field type stuff. So.
Like a hockey fight, like everything.
Yeah, it's like a very it's a very like it. They've changed the rules a bit nowadays, where it's a little calmer, but like guys used to just grab each other by the shirt and kind of swing at each other.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's just part of the sport. I don't know.
It says 80-minute matches.
Yes.
Is that both league and union? Are they both 80? Is that like, do you go 80 minutes straight? Is that broken into quarters or halves?
No,
or?
so it's halves. It's
okay.
40-minute halves. I think league has a little bit of a difference. I think it might be, it's right around there. I don't know the exact minutes, but it is a little different. But it's pretty much the same thing. 40-minute halves, just full tilt, just going at it.
Kind of like soccer where there's no like stops, or is it like more like American football where you get like a stop, a huddle, and then keep going? Or
so there's no stops like American football. So American football, after every tackle, there's a stop. In rugby, no.
Okay.
In both codes of rugby, it's you stop for what they call penalties or advantages. So it'll be like if somebody tries to play the ball on the ground, that's an advantage or a penalty, however they choose to call it. And the game kind of stops for a second, but it's like very brief, and then you go back at it, just full tilt. Right now, because of COVID restrictions, we have like water breaks. So it's more so looking like a quarter type thing, but it's not a very it's like 2-3 minutes, right now, because they have to separate people. But aside from that, it's just, you just go at it pretty much. Yeah, you gotta have a 5-minute break at halftime, that's it. And then you go right back at it.
Now, are there like a lot of I'm kind of thinking like a hockey, like how people hop off the bench and just hop right into it, or is it like,
no.
Is it just the same 13 or 15 players are going for the whole half?
So you have a number of replacements that you can make. So for our league that we're going into right now, we can travel with 17 people. 13 people are on the field, so that leaves your 4 replacements essentially. So the idea behind it is, at halftime kind of idea, you want to change certain players, like very forward heavy. So like forwards take a lot of the brunt force of everything. So they're like big dudes that are just constantly just hitting each other. Yeah, but they're also playing offense, which is the crazy part, right? So you'd think like, it's just like a big dude just has to worry about tackling, but no, he has to worry about like passing the ball. He has to worry about like playing the ball. There's a bunch of things that go into it. So that's like the great thing about rugby is like in American football, your skill set is very like, it's precise.
It's very specialized.
Yeah, it's very, very specialized. In rugby, you have to be like a man of all or woman of all trades. Like you have to be able to do a bunch of different things. Your field awareness has to be on a level that's like very different. Your athleticism maybe doesn't have to be as great as an American football player,
right?
But
you
your
have to be
awareness,
more well-rounded.
yeah, your awareness has to be like up there.
Right. You just mentioned man or woman. I do know that women's rugby is a big thing. Is it like culturally, like where you have the NBA, which is super popular, then you have the WNBA, which you're kind of like, oh, they still exist. Is it more of a pronounced fan base for the women's than in other women's sports, maybe?
I would say with rugby, it's probably a little more pronounced because the great thing about rugby is that it is an every person's sport or every man's sport, however you want to phrase that. There's world titles that are on the line constantly. You're so like New Zealand. So I'm a big All Blacks fan, which is New Zealand, right? So they have an amazing men's team, and they have the Black Ferns, which is their women's team, and they're both amazing teams, and they pretty much get the same exact support all around. Obviously, it's going to depend on what country you're in, what the culture is, stuff like that. But,
right.
I mean, overall, for the sport itself, there's a lot of support for both men's and women.
That's awesome. So scoring-wise, there's a couple of different ways to get points, it looks like.
Yes.
And you mentioned TRY is kind of like the same touchdown philosophy. You made it to the end of the field.
Yes.
How long is the field, by the way?
100 meters.
So same as a football field?
A little bit.
Or is
longer.
that 100 yards?
That's 100 yards, so it's a little bit longer.
So you get 2 points for a successful conversion. Is that like you have to kick it through goals or what?
Afterwards, yes.
Now is that like, is it, because you said everything's kind of like go, go, go. Like as soon as you like get to the end zone, is it like boom, 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 or is there a break, or how's that play out?
No, so what ends up happening is you score your try, and then your kicker is allowed to set up for their conversion. The conversion is placed in line with where the try was scored.
Okay.
So like if it's in the far right, directly where the ball is placed, basically you draw a line back, and you can pretty much kick anywhere from 10 meters on back.
So if you wanted to go further, kind of to get away from the people running at you, you could.
Yes.
But you could also get
as close as you need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
within 10 meters.
So ideally, if you're scoring, you want to try to get like dead center for your kicker, presumably.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not trying to score at like the worst angle for them to try to figure it out.
You want to put them
right?
in the best position to score as possible.
Now, it seems like chaos, but I feel like there's like a lot of actual still like plays and routes that you're trying to go for.
Yeah, it's a lot of, I would say it's organized chaos. It's
organized chaos, yeah.
Yeah, so like very different from American football where it's like you run a route.
Right.
And you have well, I guess it's kind of similar, but you run plays in American football and you stick to those plays kind of. And you look for the options out of those plays. While in rugby, you set up routes, but you're not necessarily sticking to that. You're setting up in these positions to run these routes ideally, but what's in front of you is what you play. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like if you're supposed to run a slant outward, but you see a gap, on the inside, you call for it. You let the person next to you know. So it's a lot of communication. It's a lot of screaming at each other, and it's not in a bad way. It's a good it's a good thing. You're letting the person next to you know what's going on. So
this drop kick shit sounds crazy. For 3 points, you have to drop it on the ground and kick it through the goalpost instead of like.
Yeah.
Am I reading that right?
Yeah. So I think that's a newer rule. I want to say it's past 40 meters for 3 points. I don't think in most places it's yet a rule. But drop kicks are hard. You literally like have the ball in front of you. You let it go, and it has to hit the ground first, nose down, and then you kick it right through.
That sounds nuts.
Yeah.
Who's Johnny Wilkinson? Do you know Johnny Wilkinson?
Johnny Wilkinson is an English player, yeah.
Apparently he's got the most epic... That's impressive.
Yeah.
That dude could play a hell of a game of kickball.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, let's go a definition. What is a scrum?
A scrum is in union where you basically have your forward positions and they all line up. So it's 1 through 8, basically. So the jersey you wear in union is based off of what position you play. Also in league, it's based off the position you play, but it's reverse. So like a 1 in Union is a prop, but then a 1 in league is a fullback. And your fullback's like your fastest, kind of like best stepper type player. But in Union, a scrum is both sides, they come together. It's a front row. You have 2 props and a hooker in the center of them. And you have 2 locks directly behind them with flankers, and then your 8-man in the back. And they basically lock up like that.
Is it kind of like arms around?
Yeah,
arms?
they're all connected. So the hooker wraps his arms around the prop like that, and the props have the lower back of the hooker, and everybody like shoots their head in between their legs and stuff like that. Not between their legs, but between. There's like certain gaps. It's hard to explain.
Right.
But they get as low as possible, and they just drive against each other. And then the scrum halves, they roll the ball into the scrum, and basically the hookers have to fight over the ball, push it back, and then it goes out to the side that it comes out to.
And then once it comes out, it kind of like tosses it back, and then you
the
start trying
half
to go forward.
Does a fancy little spiral pass to their fly half, and the fly half is kind of the quarterback of the quarterback of the team, and he kind of dictates what's going to happen play wise.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys would be like dislocating shoulders and all sorts of shit like every game if you're like wrapped around this with big dudes trying to go. Is it as injury ridden as one might think, or
no? Not actually, no. Because the great thing about I think the great thing about not having pads and stuff like that is there is a certain respect going into contact. So yes, you're gonna have moments where you're gonna get killed. Like there's moments where you're just gonna get rocked super hard. But nobody's necessarily going out of their way to...
Right. I've heard that argument with kind of the American football. There's the reason why there are so many injuries is people feel invincible having that padding.
Having the pads,
so there's no like reserve when you're running full speed because you have protection. Where like you're kind of like what you're saying, I think, is knowing you don't have that, you still run at them hard, but you kind of make sure to kind of protect yourself before smacking them down, right?
Rugby is more technique oriented, so there's like a certain way we tackle. So it's like we train constantly to like run up hard on a person, but we like break down the tackle where it's like we cut the person in half, we stick out our lead leg basically, and we cut the person down, and we're shooting kind of low, grabbing the back of their knees or the back of their thigh, and we're driving a shoulder in, and we're driving them back, versus the typical American football kind of tackle, which is just launch yourself into somebody type thing, So concussions and things like that do happen. Personally, myself, I've had a few concussions, but it's never been anything like super duper bad or anything like that. It's usually when you go to try to tackle somebody that's like 300 something pounds, like, and I'm kind of a big guy, but little at the same time.
Yeah, you're definitely not 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Is there like an actual rule or like an unspoken rule of like don't go for the head, or is there any like protections against that?
Yeah, so tackling cannot happen above the shoulder, so anything above here is illegal.
And that's kind of why you're going down, also to take them down, but also to ensure that you're not going.
Yeah, so typically what we shoot for is kind of shoulder into the hip. We call it the pocket. That's like the ideal tackle.
Okay.
So that's what you want to aim for. Does it happen every time? No. But it's what you shoot for. Sometimes you put a shoulder into a guy's chest, but it's okay because it's not up here. As long as you don't wrap a guy's neck or throw a shoulder into their face or anything like that, it's a safe tackle. You're not necessarily going to hurt somebody. Are you going to take the breath out of them? Sometimes, yeah.
Right. Can you drop kick people?
No.
As long as it's like low.
No, that's not a tackle. So you have to have they call it an attempt to wrap, right?
Gotcha.
So when you go in, you have to throw your shoulder into somebody and you have to attempt to wrap. So you have to throw your arms around them and try to grab them because everything's about safety. I think the referees get trained pretty well on that. It's something that they're very stringent on constantly across the board. I've never been to a game where they're just letting people high tackle or dangerously tackle people. We have yellow cards, red cards. Yellow card is a warning. I think the max time is 10 minutes that you're out of the game, but you can come back. A red card is you're out, and depending on the severity of the red card, you could be out for a few games.
Gotcha.
So, or the rest of the season. It all depends on the severity of things. But I think the refs, train pretty hard to know the difference between.
How many refs are watching? You got 30 people out there, or 28?
Yeah, so there is a head ref, basically, the guy calling the shots on the field, and then there are 2 ARs, which are assistant refs. They are on the sidelines with flags. The ref will, consult with the ARs if there's, the potential of being out to touch, which is going out the sideline, basically.
Right.
So unlike football, if you go out to touch or out the sideline, it's a turnover or a line out, basically. The ball goes to the other team.
Gotcha.
So you want to stay in the field, so they consult about that thing. Tries, they ask them, was it a try? Yes. For conversion kicks, usually there's a AR at the end of the kick, right behind the uprights, and he calls whether it's good or not.
Gotcha. So. Now there's no there's no downs or anything, right? It's just once somebody drops the ball or goes down, then the other person gets it, or.
So that would be true about union. So in union, it's unlimited, downs, basically.
Okay.
In rugby league, which is what I'm playing now, there are 6.
Okay.
So it's rugby league is very much similar to American football. I think it's closer to American football than union is. So you have 6 plays of the ball, basically, right? So on the 5th one, you're looking to kick the ball out.
Okay.
If you don't and you get tackled on the 6th, it's a turnover.
And then they pick up from where you got tackled?
Okay. Versus kicking the ball out, getting it deep as far away as you can, and you're pushing them way back there where they have to take their 6 turns to try to get back up.
Now I'm guessing there's in one of the position numbers that you would mention off, somebody's a designated kicker. Can anybody kick when it's time to kick?
The idea is that anybody can kick, but typically on teams there are designated kickers. Yeah.
Kind of just whoever could kick the furthest.
Yeah.
Try to get them to
usually
to
in league we call it our 5/8. Usually it's either a 5/8, which is your fly half or scrum half, and then sometimes it's the fullback that ends up kicking it. It just depends on the team, what their best kicker is, et cetera, et cetera.
You mentioned you're now pro and you're playing for the Cleveland Rugby League. That's not the right term though, is it?
Yeah, no, that is.
Is that right?
Yeah, Cleveland Rugby League.
I've lived in Cleveland my whole life and I've never heard of them until I saw that you posted your announcement or whatever.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that organization?
So right now there's a brand new pro league that just happened. It's called North American Rugby League. Rugby league itself tends to be more so a British Australian sport. It is played in multiple places throughout the world, in South America, stuff like that, but it's more prominent in England area and in Australia. Australia has, in my opinion, the better competition of it, which is the NRL. My favorite team for the NRL is the Rabbitohs, and in my opinion, it's a super amazing team. But it's a national sport. It's a very aggressive sport and something new to America, and I think it's going to do great here in North America. In Canada, we had the Toronto Wolfpack, which was part of Super League, which is the English competition. And unfortunately, they ended up getting dropped because of COVID. Some things happened with COVID. There's a lot of stuff that went into it. And I think it led to some people seeing there's success that could be had with this sport in America.
Right.
And some people, I think put down some money to make this league happen. And I think it's a great thing, man. It's super awesome. It's a great sport. It's a very blue-collar sport. And I think that's the thing that's going to resonate a lot with people in the U.S. is that it's very much an everyman sport. It takes athleticism, but you don't have to be necessarily the most athletic. A lot of grit goes into it. There's a lot of different things that go into it, and I think that's the thing that American audiences are going to really tailor to.
Yeah, I think if it's as I've only seen highlight films. I've never watched a full game or anything. But I think if especially as the NFL has more of this like concussion worry. If everybody's like, CTE and all this other worry, if they could do enough studies to show, rugby players play X amount of minutes and there's X amount of concussions, less than everything else, people would be like, oh, well, yeah, I'd rather have my kid go play rugby than football and get his head bashed in.
Yeah.
It also seems to me like it's like a super strong camaraderie amongst teams. Like,
it's amazing.
Like I feel like in like a baseball game, like you're like, this dude just shows up to hit, he shows up to pitch, and they go home. Well, I feel like rugby's more of like kind of like a family team. Is that the right outside perspective?
I would 100% agree with that. I think I always say this is like you have to trust the man to your left and to your right. 100%. You're going out there and you're playing a sport that requires you to put a lot into it.
Right.
It's physically demanding. It's very emotionally demanding at times. I think the demand that it puts on like your family life and stuff like that, you're sacrificing a lot to play the sport. And I mean, in America right now, most of it is just, amateur teams. And a lot of guys, they do struggle with, do I stay home with my family or do I go out here with my boys and smash some heads? You know what I mean? Like that's ultimately what it comes down to. There's a point in life where you have to sit there and you have to decide whether the sport is still for you. But at the same time, even if you decide to walk away, the sport is still there for you. The community is still there for you. And it's a beautiful thing. You can give back in so many ways. Right now I'm coaching Parma Blackhearts high school team. And it's changed my love of the sport. Mm-hmm. I thought I loved the sport one way, and now I'm teaching these kids, and they're so passionate about it. And I see, all this love that they have for the sport, and they're so young,
right.
And they have the future ahead of them. And I'm just like, holy shit. You just learn to love it in a very different way. And I think that's the thing about the sport. It adapts in so many different ways, and it's such a testament of what life is. Mm-hmm. You meet adversity and all these other things in life. There's hard moments, but what do you choose to do?
Right.
You trust what's in front of you. You trust what you have, the assets you have, the man to your left, to your right.
Right.
And you attack, and you never stop. You never lay off. And I think it's a beautiful, just like, it's poetic to me. I'm obsessed with the sport. It's like my life. I just fucking love it.
Absolutely. When is rugby season? You said you're coaching now. Is it for like a high school level? Is that spring, and is it different like at a pro level?
So for high school, spring is or the season for 15s is in spring, and then the 7th season is in fall. I only coach 15s. For men's club, right now we are doing 15 spring season, which is pretty much in Union a non-competitive season. Not to say it's not non-competitive, but there's no titles on the line or anything like that. Usually that right now is when like national titles is. Mm-hmm. So you go through all the fall competing to get a chance to go to nationals, and then nationals is in the spring. But if you're not in nationals, it's just
so then kind of touring season. Is there like a summer off season, or are clubs training year round?
Dude, you can play rugby all year long. There's 7s, there's 15s, there's 10s. So during the winter you have 10s, which is just 10 guys on each side, 10-minute halves. Mm-hmm. You have 7s during the summer, which is 7-minute halves, 7 guys on each side. That's where you have like your Perry Bakers, Carlin Isle. That's the Olympic level of it. So They play 7s in the Olympics. We have a very successful 7 side for the U.S. They're super competitive. And then for league, our season is basically the summertime.
Okay. If I understood that right, so the Olympic, there's only 7 people on each side per nation at a time, right?
Yes.
So how do they pick those 7? Is it just like the top people from the National League, or is it or is it people that don't play in National League that are just like only trained for Olympics? How does one get to be an Olympic rugby player? Do you know?
I don't know too much about it, honestly. I do know
it just seems
they invite you out to Colorado. It's a weird process. So like, I don't want to say weird. It's a very complex process. So a lot of guys, they'll be in college and they get invited to play for the U19 team, which is under 19, or like U20, I think it's U23 team. And, they get invited to do these tournaments under the Eagles brand, which is the U.S. team. And then they kind of just like have tryouts to it at the same time. They kind of find who it is that they're going to, have, and they make the national team off of that.
Now, is this Olympic level, is that like all, it sounds like you're saying like early 20s, or is there older dudes on those teams?
No, there's older dudes, but they're all studs. Like, they're you could play pro rugby and still not make a national side. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very, they're very standout in their...
It seems like once you said there's 7 people, I'm like, that's a prestigious, like...
So I think they pick 12... So I think altogether they have like 23, 24 people that they can pick from for every tournament they go to. I think they take 12 or 15, something like that. But there's only 7 people at a time on the field. Right. So they have their backups and stuff like that. But it's a very like, it's a process to get onto the team and stuff like that, to get selected.
Absolutely. If one person wanted to play rugby, what would they need? It doesn't seem like there's any equipment other than a ball and finding a league, it seems.
Some cleats.
So you do wear cleats?
Yeah. So we wear, buy soccer cleats, if anything, or rugby cleats. Soccer cleats tend to be cheaper.
Is there a difference between like a football, soccer, rugby cleat? I'm like a barefoot hippie. I don't know these things.
Yeah, no, so football cleats, they tend to have more spikes. I don't know. There's differences if you look at them. It's hard to...
Just the way that the bottom, like the shape or the...
Yeah, it's like the flexibility, and there's like a bunch of like little things. Football cleats tend to be more like mid-ankle.
Okay.
Soccer cleats and rugby cleats are a lower...
What's the likelihood somebody's getting cleated in the game? Does that happen often? Or it seems like a lot of people go on the ground grabbing at shit. Like, it seems like a meat masher almost.
Yeah, so back in the day, it's called raking. It used to be a thing in the sport. Not so much now. It happens every once in a while. But people used to like scrape their cleats at each other and stuff like that. But you got to piss somebody off for that to happen.
Right.
Yeah, it still happens every once in a while, but it's not a very common thing.
Let's see. What does the internet ask about rugby? I think we covered a lot of different things, but let's see. There's a lot of weird, like... Everybody's rarely interested in the comparison versus the NFL and what rugby is. Any other good ones?
So I will say that overall, probably the athletes that are in the NFL are probably a better athlete. Like a more, like, skill-wise, how do I say it? Like, the athleticism that comes with being in the NFL is insane. Right? They can beat a rugby player in certain aspects. The one thing they will never beat a rugby player in is endurance. Well, it's endurance and it's like field awareness. It's like being open to what is going on all over. Mm-hmm. So, like in American football, you have blockers and, like, they help you run kind of deal, right? But in rugby... Everybody in that defensive line is tackling you, and nobody can block for you at all. So when you're stepping somebody, it's like you're stepping somebody. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big deal. Mm. I don't know. There's levels of the. A lot of guys that play rugby have tried to come to the U.S. and be, football players, and some have met success, and a lot of them haven't.
Right.
But then at the same time, if an American football player went to go play rugby, they wouldn't find the same success. Do it either, right? Yeah, but they'd be pretty athletic out there. You know what I mean? Like, they'd have some pretty good runs and stuff like that. Yeah, they'd
make some highlight reels, but it wouldn't be like a longevity career.
Exactly, yeah.
I get you.
Without learning the sport properly.
Would you agree with this statement that rugby is a game for thugs played by gentlemen? That seems like a cool quote.
Yeah, it's a cool quote. I would not say that myself particularly. From what I've learned of rugby, it's that's a very common like quote. But what I've learned from rugby is like, yes, you do hurt each other out there, but you're not thuggish about it. It's in a very respectful manner. Some people do go out there and they're, kind of that mentality like, put it all out on the field, hurt that person across from me, fuck them if they get hurt type deal.
Right.
And then expect afterwards everything's cool. But for the most part, I think there's a certain respect that you have for each other on the field and off the field. I think at the end of the day, you realize we all have to go to work on Monday.
That's awesome. Would you do your kids play rugby?
As of right now, no, and I hope they do so bad. Especially my 4-year-old Dombo. He's built like me. He's just a stocky little dude, just big. He's 4 years old and he's bigger than his 6-year-old brother. And I just pray. I cross my fingers every day. I'm like, please play rugby. Please play rugby. Please play rugby.
One thing we didn't cover, which is definitely a big difference between football and rugby. How would you describe a rugby? Is it called a ball, like the actual thing that you play with? Is it?
Oh yeah, it's a ball. Yeah.
But what makes it different? Like is it hollow? Is it heavy? Like how would you describe the rugby ball?
No, it's not heavy at all.
I don't think I've ever actually held one.
I think it's a 4-pound ball or a 5-pound ball, something like that. It's definitely bigger than a American football. Man, I wish I would have brought one. It's just a bigger ball.
It's an elongated ball.
Yeah. It's hard to describe. I don't know. It's just bigger. It's probably if you took like 2 footballs, like American footballs, would make one rugby ball. It's about I don't know.
A full-size ball weighs between 383 and 440 grams, which equates to 13.5 and 15.5 ounces. So that means just short of a pound.
Oh, short of a pound. Okay.
Because a pound would be 16 ounces. So if it's 15.5, does it feel like a pound? Does it feel heavier than that?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know what a pound feels like.
You have to go get a pound of flour, a pound of sugar.
Yeah.
Let me see what we got.
Be like, hey, which one? Yay!
So you said twice the size of a football. Do you mean twice this way, twice that way?
I would say probably twice this way.
So you kind of fit it,
grabbing,
kind of forearm fit?
Yeah, it fits perfectly right into your forearm.
Do they pop? What are they filled with?
Air.
Just air?
Yeah. They used to be made out of pigskin. Just like an American football, pretty much. I think once they started getting into the 80s is when they started making it more like... It's pretty much... I don't know, it's like a...
Pig's bladder, actually, is what the original was. Not pig skin. They went even weirder with it. They're like, how can we repurpose his bladder? Let's make him gay.
Let's not eat it. Let's make a sport.
Then after the technologies changed, they switched up the stuff.
It's like plastic or something. I don't know.
That's cool. What else should we know? What else do we not cover for the idiot that's kind of interested that might have some questions? I feel like we got a lot of at least all of the main questions that the internet's been asking, and all the questions that came to mind for me. TV-wise, I feel like I've only seen it a few times on TV.
It's so hard to watch on TV. It's ridiculously hard to find somewhere to watch it. So, unfortunately, what ends up happening is since it's mainly a sport played overseas. So we do have, for Union, we have the MLR here in the U.S. It used to be on ESPN. I don't know what it's on this year. Mm-hmm. It's something different. But to watch, overseas... games, you have to have a bunch of different streaming services, or just wait for the games to be released on YouTube that you can watch afterwards.
Right.
Fortunately for Cleveland Rugby League and the NARL, the league that I'm going to be playing for, we have a streaming service called sportsflix.com, and it will have all of our games there. Easy access. It's a one-stop shop for everything NARL.
Right.
So it's going to be a great thing, man.
Absolutely. So we covered that you're a badass military man. You play wicked rugby games, but you also are a creative person. You write music. You play at least like guitar, I believe. You got a couple instruments under your belt.
Yeah, guitar, ukulele, a little bit of keyboard. That's pretty much it.
Do you read music, or do you just kind of figure it out on the fly?
So I played trumpet all throughout middle school into high school.
Mm-hmm.
So technically I can read music. I do not read music currently. I have not practiced reading music in well over 20 years probably.
Right. And then you also have the credits for the ooze on Love Struck with Dirty Backpack, right?
Yeah.
I believe that you actually have like listed credit. There's no actual singing of him. There's no rapping or anything, but there's a distinct ooh.
Ooh. Yeah.
And it definitely he sent me the instrumentals of that way before, and he sent two. He's like one with ooze and one without.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Has music kind of been always in your life, or you mentioned kind of playing the trumpet early on?
In a weird way, yes. I don't think I never started playing guitar until I was about 17 years old. I nagged my parents really hard for a guitar, and finally, they broke down and got me a guitar. And I would like to say, probably every day after that, I practiced probably 2 to 3 hours every single day for a good solid year, maybe more. And I annoyed the shit out of my mom so bad. But I never wrote a song, never like did my own thing until I was probably about like 24, and I was starting to go through my first failed marriage. And at that point, it was like I had played so many songs that other people had written, and I was searching for a way to like deal with the pain that I had. Because at that point, I was in the TAC-P school, and that's a major part of like why I never ended up doing that career field, is because of my situation with divorce and stuff like that. But I was searching for a way to like deal with it, and it was like, at 24 years old, you talk to your dudes, and they're just like, there's plenty of fish in the sea, you'll get over it, bro, just like bang another chick, and it's like, you sit there and you're like, dude, my life is falling apart right now. Like, right. I don't need to hear that. Like, I need to feel what I'm feeling and like get through it. And I think at that moment is where music like really like kind of saved me in that aspect, where it was like, it gave me somewhere to like put poetically what I was feeling and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's anybody that plays instruments, I'm always like, that's awesome. Like, even if it's not like the greatest, like, because it takes time, like you said. Even if you could just strum somebody else's couple of chords. Like, that took muscle memory. It took the time to figure it out, to get the material. Like,
I'm a trash guitar player. Like, I can play chords.
Right.
That's about it. I'm a way better like lyric writer than I am ever like a guitar player. I can't shred anything. I can't play a single solo, like nothing like that. But I can definitely play some chords.
I feel like I've heard you play ukulele somewhere.
Yes, I have played ukulele multiple times on like Facebook. I have some videos and stuff like that.
I would definitely say not too many rugby / songwriters, or is that kind of like,
I don't know, man. Those Pacific Islanders, man, they're men of many talents. They can sing, play guitar, ukulele, smash some heads.
That's awesome.
Love their family. There's some pretty talented dudes out there.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever play rugby, but it's definitely something that's like, whenever I see it, like, it's hard. It's kind of like a car crash. Like, it's kind of hard to take your eyes away from it. Like, if you are in a bar or somewhere and you see like highlights of it, you're like, wow, those dudes are just going at it with no pads. You're like, something bad's going to happen eventually.
Dude, I would highly recommend it, even if it's just for a day. If you just make a rugby career of one day, just go out there and just career. Just do it. It's so awesome. It's liberating. It's a very free feeling to like, as weird as it might sound, it's like a safe space to be aggressive.
A safe place to be aggressive.
Yeah.
That should be like a bumper sticker.
Right?
With a little rugby ball next to it. Where do you see rugby in the next 5 years?
Man, where do I see it?
You could take that either America, abroad, anywhere, just the sport in general in 5 years.
In 5 years, I see it growing, even more so than it is. I think internationally for Union, it's pretty much on the rise. I mean, sevens has taken off really big, especially since it started being a Olympic sport. For league, I really hope that it continues to grow. Right now, it's kind of stuck in some countries, and I think with the introduction of the NARL here in the U.S., I really think we have a chance to really push it, and I hope in 5 years that it catches on and people really take to it, and we could just take the sport to a whole nother level.